What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 17. Sleepers and studs.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and my favorite stud at each position.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay guys, NFL Week 17. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. So you got a couple studs on the slate here in Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. But the stud that I like the most is Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 6th worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Josh Allen has averaged 26.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.8 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 12% owned, projected at 24.8 fantasy points here in Week 17. He's $8,000 DraftKings salary and $800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44 points scored in this game, with the Bills favored by 14.5. So this is a fantastic matchup for Josh Allen. I think he could get all his fantasy points, 25 plus fantasy points in just 3/4 of this game. It's a great matchup. I think he's going to run and pass all over the Atlanta Falcons. And Josh Allen has scored 34, 22, and 42 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 12, 3, and 12 rush attempts. So I like Josh Allen here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, now my sleeper pick at the quarterback position is Joe Burrow from the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Joe Burrow has averaged 20.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 2.3 rush attempts per game. He's only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 19.2 fantasy points here in Week 17. He's $6,900 DraftKings salary and $800 more on FanDuel. So one thing I like about this pick is that Vegas thinks there's going to be 51 points scored in this game, with the Bengals trailing by 5. So you have a high-scoring game, a great matchup, and a passing game script. And Joe Burrow has scored 41, 13, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And he got 2, 5, and 2 rush attempts in those games. So I like Joe Burrow here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So a couple studs on the slate. Well, I'll just give you 3 studs real quick. So guys that are $6,500 DraftKings salary or more, I like David Montgomery, Joe Mixon, and Jonathan Taylor. So let's just go over the best or the most impressive stud of them all, possibly MVP this year, Jonathan Taylor from the Indianapolis Colts playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Jonathan Taylor has averaged 25 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 19.8 rush attempts per game and 3 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 18% owned, projected at 23.8 fantasy points here in Week 17. He's $9,000 DraftKings salary, $1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Colts favored by 7. So Jonathan Taylor has just been on an absolute tear this year. I remember the game that the fans were basically shouting, "More Jonathan Taylor! More Jonathan Taylor!" They were booing when the Colts didn't give Jonathan Taylor the ball. And I bet everyone is so happy they listened to the fans or to everyone else and finally started giving this guy the rock. I mean, take a look at this game log here. Let's go the last 5 games. He scored 14, 26, 28, 20, and 56 fantasy points in the last 5 games. And in the last 3 games, he had 27, 29, and 32 rush attempts. He also got 2 pass targets last game. So that is some unbelievable volume. I mean, close to averaging like 30 touches a game for the past 3 games. So I like Jonathan Taylor here versus the Las Vegas Raiders.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $100 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $100 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, now my sleeper pick at the running back position, he's actually not super low owned here, but I do think he's going to slide under the radar this week. I like Rashad Penny from the Seattle Seahawks playing the Detroit Lions, who have the 4th worst defense overall. They give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Rashad Penny has scored 23, 6, and 30 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 17, 11, and 16 rush attempts on top of 1, 2, and 1 pass target. He's going to be about 6% owned, projected at 11.5 fantasy points here in week 17. He's 6,100 DraftKings salary and 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Seahawks favored by 7. Now, I would take the Seahawks if I was going to bet on this game. I think that's probably a pretty good bet on the slate this week because Seattle Seahawks got all their pass catchers healthy. Russell Wilson has had some games under his belt now to sharpen his throwing arm. And Rashad Penny has a fantastic matchup here versus the Detroit Lions. Rashad Penny's been rolling 2 out of the last 3 weeks. He's put up some pretty big numbers. So I like Rashad Penny here versus the Detroit Lions. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. Okay, so studs on the slate. You got Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Stephon Diggs. Now, Cooper Kupp, we all know he is just playing out of his mind this year. He's 9,500 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. This guy's just producing every single week, and he's got a great matchup here versus the Baltimore Ravens, who have the 5th worst defense overall. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Cooper Kupp has scored 24, 38, and 34 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks off of 13, 13, and 15 pass targets. It's going to be about 16% owned. So I like Cooper Kupp, just like everyone else in the fantasy world here versus the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the stud that I like the most, because you're going to save a bunch of salary with this pick coming off of Cooper Kupp, I would just be careful of Deebo Samuel. I'm not sure what the quarterback situation is going to be there. Jimmy Garoppolo got injured last week, so keep an eye on that. It's always a little bit risky with a new quarterback. But so the stud that I like the most on the slate, and especially if you want to pair him up with the stud quarterback Josh Allen, I like Stephon Diggs from the Buffalo Bills playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 6th worst defense overall. They give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Stephon Diggs has averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.5 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 82% of the snaps, going to be about 10% owned, projected at 18.2 fantasy points here in week 17. He's 7,900 DraftKings salary, 100 more on FanDuel. And Stephon Diggs has scored 22, 14, and 14 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 13, 7, and 13 pass targets. So great matchup here. I think Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs could have a phenomenal week 17. They both have great matchups versus the Atlanta Falcons. And I really do think they're going to run over the Falcons and probably get all their fantasy points all the way up third quarter. They might not even have to play the fourth quarter, and they'll both still hit value. So I like Stephon Diggs here versus the Atlanta Falcons.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, now my sleeper pick for the wide receiver position, I got a couple of guys here, Brandon Cooks and Tyler Boyd. Now, Tyler Boyd's only going to be about 3% owned. It's only 5,400 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's got a middle-of-the-pack defense or a middle-of-the-pack matchup. But remember, we said Vegas thinks there's going to be 51 points scored in this game with the Bengals trailing by 5. So I like the Joe Burrow, Tyler Boyd stack, save some salary at both positions. And both these guys got big upside. Tyler Boyd has scored 18, 21, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 5, 6, and 5 pass targets. So I like Tyler Boyd here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Now I also like Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans playing the San Francisco 49ers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Brandon Cooks has averaged 15.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.5 pass targets per game. Those are some pretty impressive numbers. So not sure why his ownership is not a little bit higher here, and he just seems to be under-owned week after week. Only going to be about 6% owned. He's on the field for 86% of the snaps, projected at 13.7 fantasy points here in week 17. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary, 500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44 points scored in this game, with the Houston Texans trailing by 10. So good matchup here. It's a passing game script. And Brandon Cooks, he didn't play last week, but he scored 32 and 21 fantasy points in the 2 games before that, off of 10 and 11 pass targets. So I like Brandon Cooks here versus the San Francisco 49ers. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. We have a clear-cut stud on the slate here. This guy's going to find his way into a few of my lineups. I like Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Travis Kelce has averaged 17.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.7 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 83% of the snaps, going to be about 7% owned, projected at 17.7 fantasy points here in week 17. He's 7,300 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 51 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 5. So great matchup for Travis Kelce, who didn't play last week, so he's going to be rested and good to go. And he scored 44 fantasy points the game before that off of 13 pass targets. I think he's going to get 10 plus pass targets in this one. I think he's going to be a monster in this game. So I like Travis Kelce here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, now I got a couple of sleeper picks for you here at the tight end position. So I like Noah Fant and Gerald Everett. Both about the same price, both at about the same salary, both have great matchups. So the guy I like out of those two is Gerald Everett from the Seattle Seahawks playing the Detroit Lions, who have the 4th worst defense overall. They give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Gerald Everett has averaged 8.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.2 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 3% owned, projected at 8.8 fantasy points here in week 17. He's 4,100 DraftKings salary, 1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42.5 points scored in this game. They have the Seattle Seahawks favored by 7. So, guys, drop a comment down below if you want to see some sports betting content on Draft Dashboard YouTube channel. We do DFS right now, but I think that we should start doing some sports betting content if there's enough of you out there that want a sports betting show. Maybe we could do an NFL one like once or twice a week, and maybe we could even do some NBA sports betting content. So, and maybe even some MLB when that gets started. So go ahead and drop a comment below if you are interested in some sports betting content. So my pick of the week this week for week 17 would be the Seattle Seahawks by 0.5 point. So you're going to get the Seattle Seahawks by 6.5 points. So if they win by a touchdown, you'll win your bet. I think that's a great bet here versus the Detroit Lions. And I like Gerald Everett as a DFS play, as a sleeper pick here versus the Detroit Lions. Oh, Gerald Everett has scored 17, 10, and 11 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 5, 4, and 2 pass targets. So 10 plus fantasy points in his last 3 games. It's got a great matchup. Yeah, so I like Gerald Everett here versus the Detroit Lions.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.